My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 44, and until recently, I thought I had a pretty stable life. I worked as a construction project manager in Boulder, Colorado, and my wife, Claire, worked part time at a local wellness clinic. We'd been married for just under a decade. No kids, which looking back feels more like a blessing than I realized at the time. We lived a quiet life. Our house was modest but fully paid off, our income steady. I wasn't flashy, just someone who liked structure and peace. A few years before Claire and I got married, I bought a small cabin out near Blue River. It wasn't huge, just 2 bedrooms and a worn-out dock out back, but it was mine. I paid for every square foot with my own savings. No loans, no co-signers, just me and a dream to have a place tucked away in the woods where I could fish, read, and escape the world. Claire never shared my love for the place. She preferred beachside resorts, five-star breakfasts, and fast Wi-Fi. The cabin didn't suit her. Still, every time I spoke of it, I'd say our cabin mostly out of habit, maybe a bit of kindness. I thought it made things feel more shared. I never thought those small words would come back to bite me. Then came the winter 2 years ago. Claire's father, Dennis, lost his job at a local accounting firm. Her mother, Susan, had never worked much outside of doing small crafts for local fairs, but it wasn't a serious income. Suddenly they were in trouble. Their rent in Twin Falls shot up. Their credit cards were maxed out. Dennis even mentioned maybe staying in a roadside motel until spring. Claire came to me crying, pleading. "They just need a place to catch their breath," she said. "It's only temporary." I hesitated. The cabin was my sanctuary, but I wasn't heartless. I agreed on one condition: they'd sign a short-term agreement I drafted myself. It stated they could stay through the winter rent-free, but had to vacate by May unless Claire and I both agreed otherwise. No major alterations. The cabin remained legally mine. My buddy, who was a notary, helped make it official. Claire rolled her eyes when I brought up the paperwork. "They're not strangers, Dan," she said. "You don't need to make it all formal." But something in me insisted. I didn't know then, but that small bit of caution would later become the only thing protecting what was rightfully mine. By mid-November, Dennis and Susan had moved into the cabin. I stayed out of their way, honestly. I was swamped with a highway renovation project and figured I'd just let them settle in. Claire kept me posted with casual updates. "Dad fixed the back steps," she said once. Another time it was Mom added curtains to the dining window. "Looks a little cozier now." Small stuff. Nothing that raised red flags. I didn't love the idea of them redecorating, but I figured they were just keeping busy. I hadn't seen the cabin in months when I suddenly found myself with a free Saturday in April. I didn't tell Claire. I thought maybe I'd surprise them, bring a six-pack, cast a line in the creek. Just something simple. I packed up some jerky, my old tackle box, and hit the road early. It was a crisp morning as I pulled up the gravel drive, and immediately something felt wrong. There was a new gate at the entrance, a heavy steel thing with a keypad, not the padlock I'd given them. I stared at it for a moment, thinking maybe it was temporary, but no, it was drilled right into the posts. I keyed in a few default codes and got nothing. That annoyed me, but I wasn't ready to panic, not yet. I parked just outside the gate, climbed over, and made my way to the front porch. That's when I noticed my old lantern had been replaced with a sleek motion detector. I pulled out my key only to find it didn't fit the lock. They had changed it, without asking, without telling me. Now I was mad. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. Finally, Dennis opened the door. He didn't look startled, just mildly annoyed. Leaning on the doorframe, he said, "Would have been nice to get a heads up, Dan." "What happened to my key?" I asked. He gave this thin smile. "We made a few upgrades." I stepped past him into the cabin. He didn't stop me, but he didn't move either. Inside, it was like walking into someone else's living room. My recliner gone. New rugs, new frames on the walls. Not a single photo of me, not even in the hallway. Claire walked out from the back holding a mug like it was just another Sunday. "It's still family property," she said with a calm smile, as if that line excused everything. I didn't argue. I walked room to room, growing colder with each step. Then I saw it. A binder labeled Blue River Cabin Documents on the desk. What I found inside would change everything. The binder sat like a trophy on the office desk, neat, organized, even color-coded. The cover read Blue River Cabin Property File. At first I thought maybe it was just their way of keeping utilities and cleaning receipts together. I opened it, expecting nothing more than a few invoices. What I saw instead made my stomach twist. There it was, an entire section labeled Ownership Records. The first page, a fabricated deed. A full-page printout showing Claire as the sole owner of the cabin. It even had a county seal, faint but fake, and a bogus document number. The dates were wrong. The formatting was sloppy, but someone had clearly tried to make it look official. Right beneath that, a one-page agreement handwritten in bullet points and signed by Dennis and Susan. It said the cabin was now to be jointly managed by immediate family and that equal access rights were granted to Mark and Susan Campbell as co-stewards. There was even a ridiculous note at the bottom. Dan considers this a shared family legacy. My signature wasn't there, but a scrawled witnessed by Claire sat at the bottom. I stared at it for a solid minute, blood pounding in my ears. "Where the hell did this come from?" I asked, holding up the fake deed. Dennis shrugged. "We're just getting things in order." "You didn't seem to care much about the place anymore," Claire added, sitting on the edge of the couch like she was on a daytime talk show. I didn't yell, I didn't curse, I just left. Got in my truck, drove the 2 hours back home without saying another word. As soon as I walked in, I headed straight for the fireproof safe in my closet. Inside was the original deed, dated, signed, notarized, with only my name. I pulled out the temporary stay agreement Dennis and Susan had signed too. It spelled everything out. The cabin was mine. Their stay was conditional, no changes without my written consent. I read the whole thing again just to steady my hands. Then I made copies. By the next morning, I had mailed them with a calm, clear cover letter to the one person Claire's family never expected her aunt's ex-husband, George Whitaker. A retired real estate lawyer in Reno, cold-blooded, old school, the man Claire's mother Susan once called a vulture in a tie. I'd met him twice. He didn't like Dennis, didn't trust Susan, and he certainly had no patience for family schemes. I figured if anyone could light a fire under this situation, it was him. In the letter, I didn't rant, I didn't beg, I wrote, "Mr. Whitaker, they're attempting to steal property I purchased years before my marriage. The documentation speaks for itself. I trust you'll know what to do." I signed it, enclosed the notarized agreement and deed, and dropped it at the post office myself. 3 days later, my phone rang. George's first words, "Well, Dan, I've been waiting for this." George wasn't the type to waste words. That morning he called from a landline. I could hear the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the background. His voice was sharp, calm, and laced with that old-school authority only men like him possessed. I read every page, Dan, he said. They screwed up, badly. He asked a few questions, nothing emotional, just facts. When did they move in? Did I have any texts or photos from the cabin? Had I made any contact since I discovered the fake documents? I answered every one. Sent him digital copies within the hour, including an old photo of me holding the cabin's key the day I bought it, time-stamped smiling like a fool. I also included screenshots of a text Claire sent me a year ago, saying, "Glad you have your cabin to relax in this weekend." Her words, her phrasing, her mistake. George didn't need convincing. He told me flat out, this isn't just a civil matter, it borders on fraud. Then he paused. You know they tried something similar in the past, right? I blinked. No. Back in '04, they tried manipulating Susan's aunt into signing over part of her land in Humboldt County. I shut it down, caught them cold. Dennis tried to say he was owed for emotional support. Sound familiar? I exhaled, half laughing. Yeah, it does. George was already steps ahead. That same day, he drafted a cease and desist letter on firm letterhead, still had contacts even in retirement. He addressed it to Dennis, Susan, and Claire, outlining in plain language the violations they'd committed: breach of agreement, attempted fraudulent claim of ownership, and unlawful possession of private property. He mailed it certified and followed up by emailing scanned copies to all three of them. And then he added the final blow. Unless you vacate the premises within 10 business days, legal proceedings will commence, including a damages claim and a referral to the Washoe County District Attorney. Boom. That lit the fuse. The next evening, Claire blew up my phone. Call after call, then texts. You didn't have to do this. Why are you threatening my family? We were just trying to make it feel like a shared space. I didn't answer, not a single one. Finally, around 11 p.m., I picked up. She was already mid-sentence, voice shaking with rage. You went behind my back, brought in George, she yelled. They're just trying to make it ours, something we can all use. I let her finish. Then I said, calm as stone, it was never yours. You never paid for it. You never wanted it. You only wanted control. She went silent. I could hear her breathing short and frantic. Then in a low voice, she said something I'll never forget. If you had just let this go, none of this would have happened. I hung up, and I knew in that moment the war had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. After Claire's call, I just sat in my kitchen, lights off, rereading the agreement Dennis and Susan signed. Rereading the deed, rereading her text about the cabin being your place to unwind. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was betrayal. And it was only just beginning. The very next morning, George called again, this time sounding almost amused. You won't believe what they tried to do, he said. I braced myself. They submitted a new deed to the Washoe County Clerk's office. A quick claim transfer. It lists both you and Claire as co-owners, claiming the original deed was incomplete. The notary listed is someone named Ashley Flores. Know her? My blood went cold. Ashley was Claire's 22-year-old niece. She'd just posted about passing her notary exam 2 months ago. She notarized this, I asked. Yep, signed and stamped. And unless she retracts it, that's criminal falsification. George had already sent an email to the clerk flagging the submission. He followed that with a notice to Ashley, informing her she had 48 hours to withdraw the notarization and submit a written statement, or she could face accessory charges. By 3 p.m. that day, Ashley cracked. She called George crying, said Claire told her it was just cleaning up a paperwork oversight, and begged her to help fix a family error. Ashley withdrew the notarization within the hour and emailed a signed letter admitting what she did and who told her to do it. That blew the lid off everything. Now, it wasn't just a petty property dispute, it was attempted fraud. Claire and her parents hadn't just overstepped, they crossed into criminal territory. George asked me one simple question: "Are you ready to take this to the DA?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. We began prepping a full legal assault, civil and criminal. George outlined the charges: falsifying legal documents, coercion of a notary, attempted theft of real property, and malicious trespassing. That weekend, I drove up to the cabin. They hadn't moved out. In fact, they'd doubled down. The porch was covered in new plants, furniture, wind chimes. Dennis was hammering something on the deck. Susan waved like I was a neighbor stopping by for tea. I didn't say a word. I took out my phone, documented everything. The new paint, the changed locks, the security camera they'd installed over the front door, still operational, likely streaming to Claire's phone. Then I saw it. Spray painted on the inside of the garage door in red: "Greedy Snake." It was childish, it was spiteful, and it was evidence. I took pictures of every corner of that house: the garbage they left in the shed, the broken fixtures, the shattered lamp near the window. George compiled it all into a damage report, and then he filed a formal eviction notice. They had 14 days to vacate. Claire texted me the next day, "You're tearing apart your own family." I didn't respond, because by now I understood something she never would. Family doesn't steal from you. And if they do, they're not family anymore. Claire's text sat unread for 2 days. I didn't need to open it. I already knew the contents: more manipulation, more guilt-tripping, more blame-shifting. I wasn't playing that game anymore. 2 days later, George filed the civil lawsuit: intentional property damage, forgery, trespassing, legal costs, emotional distress. The total claim, $43,750. That wasn't just a number. It was a signal. We weren't negotiating anymore, we were prosecuting. Claire tried to act innocent. She posted online about being betrayed and how money poisons love. One of her cousins left a comment under the post: "Didn't your parents forge a deed?" It stayed up for 10 minutes before Claire deleted everything. George moved fast. He sent a cease and desist letter to Dennis and Susan, followed by a formal demand to vacate within 14 days. It was airtight, filled with time-stamped photos, the notarized agreement, Ashley's written confession, and a signed affidavit from Mel. That's when Dennis made his move. He filed a restraining order, claimed I had threatened him, that I showed up with hostile intent, yelled in his face, and made him fear for his life. Said Susan had a panic attack and had to lie down for hours after I left. A bold-faced lie. George crushed it in 36 hours. He submitted GPS logs, security camera screenshots, the very ones they installed, and text evidence showing I never made contact since that visit. The judge threw the restraining order out before it even hit the courtroom floor. But now I was done playing defense. George contacted the county DA's office. He handed them everything: the forged quitclaim deed, Ashley's confession, the damage photos, the emails between Claire and her parents discussing how to flip the cabin. The restraining order stunt. The DA responded within a week. They opened a preliminary review and notified Claire, Dennis, and Susan. Charges could follow if any more false moves were made. And just like that, the tide shifted. Claire started panicking. I saw it in her texts: shorter, sloppier, more desperate. One night she showed up at my house uninvited. I didn't open the door. She yelled from the porch asking if I could just forgive and start over. I turned off the porch light. 2 days later, George got a letter from Claire's lawyer demanding mediation. His response: "We're not negotiating with fraud." Dennis and Susan, meanwhile, tried to save face. They filed a claim in small claims court alleging that the cabin was offered as a family retreat and that my eviction notice was based on bad faith. We responded with the notarized agreement that said otherwise. They withdrew the claim the very next morning. As the trial date approached, Mel texted me, "Just say the word, I'll testify." I thanked her, not just for the statement, but for being the one person in that twisted family who had a spine. The rest, they were just rats panicking in a storm of their own making. The trial came faster than I expected. George and I showed up early at the Polk County Courthouse. He wore his usual dark blazer, calm and unreadable. I brought everything, copies of every document, photo, email, and text. We didn't come to argue, we came to end it. Claire, Dennis, and Susan arrived 20 minutes late. No lawyer, just them dressed like they were attending Sunday service. Claire wore white as if that would paint her innocent. Susan looked pale. Dennis, cocky. They thought they'd talk their way out of this. Big mistake. The judge began by reviewing the case summary. George stood and laid out our case clearly, the notarized agreement Claire's parents had signed. The fake quit-claim deed. Ashley's notarized confession, Mel's email thread and sworn statement. The physical damage to the cabin, the false restraining order, the forged notary records. It was surgical. When George handed the judge the printed email thread between Claire, Dennis, and Susan, where they discussed flipping the cabin before Evan gets smart, I saw Claire's hands clench into fists. The judge took his time, then he leaned forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he said, addressing Dennis and Susan, "you knowingly signed a document granting you temporary access to a property not owned by you. You then changed locks, altered documents, and attempted to fabricate ownership. Do you understand that these are criminal offenses under state law?" Dennis opened his mouth, but the judge didn't let him speak. "This is not a debate, yes or no." Dennis muttered, "Yes." The judge turned to Claire. "Mrs. Nolan, you participated in forging documents, coercing a notary, and attempting to claim a property you never had legal title to. This is egregious. If not for Mr. Nolan's restraint, this could already be a criminal trial." Claire looked at me. I didn't flinch. George stood again. "Your Honor, we request immediate judgment on all civil claims and a recommendation for criminal investigation." The judge nodded once. "Granted." Bang of the gavel. And just like that, it was official. I was declared the sole legal owner of the cabin. Dennis and Susan were ordered to pay $43,750 for damages, legal costs, and fraudulent actions. The judge also referred their actions for criminal review. Claire, he called her conduct manipulative and premeditated and made a formal note on record for the DA. Outside, Claire tried to approach me. I was scared, she said, tears forming. "You were selfish," I replied. "You tried to rewrite the truth." She opened her mouth, but I walked away. That night, I stood on the porch of my cabin, a cool beer in hand, watching the sun disappear behind the pines. For the first time in months, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peace. The fallout was swift. Dennis and Susan didn't have the money. Their retirement condo in Oregon was sold under pressure, and the proceeds went straight into paying the court-ordered damages. It wasn't enough. They had to downsize drastically, moving into a small two-bedroom rental on the edge of Portland, far from the lakeside community they used to brag about. Their credit tanked, so did their reputation. Word spread through the extended family quickly. George had made sure the court documents were part of the public record, and somehow, without me lifting a finger, those records found their way into family group chats. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain they painted me to be. I was the one who had been robbed. Claire tried to do damage control. She posted on Facebook about how she'd been manipulated by a controlling husband who tore her family apart. She framed herself as the victim of emotional abuse, hoping to gather sympathy. But it backfired. Because Melanie, God bless her, posted screenshots of the email thread between Claire and her parents right under that post. The one where Claire wrote, "Evan won't fight if we corner him emotionally." That comment thread exploded, and just like that, Claire lost the last thread of her narrative. Ashley, the notary cousin, lost her license. She was fined and publicly reprimanded. George and I agreed not to pursue charges against her. She had admitted everything and apologized sincerely. She was barely 23, and I could tell she got swept up in something she didn't fully understand. I let it go. She was just a pawn. But Claire wasn't. She tried to fight the divorce, tried to claim partial ownership of the cabin one last time, arguing that our shared time there made it emotional marital property. George countered with every receipt, message, and statement we had. Claire's lawyer dropped the claim before it could even reach a hearing. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Claire moved to Boise under her maiden name. I didn't ask for alimony, I just wanted out. She left behind her key, her wedding ring, and her lies. And me. I reclaimed more than just the deed. I got back my space, my clarity, my peace of mind. I spent the next few weekends rebuilding what had been broken, both the cabin and myself. I refinished the floors, replaced the furniture, hung up new photos, this time of me of fishing trips with friends, of sunsets over the lake. I even put up a wooden sign near the driveway, "Private property, no exceptions." Not out of spite, but to remind myself never again. I learned something through this fire. I had spent years trying to be the good guy, the peacemaker, the silent provider. But boundaries aren't unkind, they are necessary. And now I go up to the cabin every other weekend. Sometimes alone, sometimes with people I trust, always with peace. Sometimes I still sit on the porch and think about everything that happened, not out of regret, but reflection. People say revenge is a dish best served cold, but what I learned is that real revenge doesn't come with shouting matches or courtroom drama. It comes with silence, with peace, with knowing that the people who tried to tear you down now have to live in the rubble they created. Dennis and Susan, they're ghosts of their former selves. I heard they live paycheck to paycheck, now both working part-time jobs they hate, still blaming everyone but themselves. No one at the family reunions wants to speak to them. George told me that even his older cousins cut them off, said what they did was beyond repair. Ashley's fine. She took responsibility, faced the consequences, and started over. She even sent me a handwritten apology. I didn't respond, but I appreciated it. That's more than I can say for Claire. Claire. She vanished from my life the moment the ink dried on the divorce. I haven't heard a single word since. She didn't contest the settlement again, didn't show up to the last mediation. She simply disappeared, probably trying to rewrite her story in another city with new friends who don't know what she did. I used to wonder if I should have done things differently. Maybe said no from the start, maybe pushed back sooner. But then I remember I gave people chances. I showed them trust. They chose to betray that. Their actions weren't mistakes, they were plans, and plans deserve consequences. What I got in return wasn't just a piece of land with trees and water. I got something money can't buy. I got to rediscover who I am when I'm not bending over backwards to keep others comfortable. I found strength in stillness, clarity in solitude. I realized that I don't need to explain my boundaries to people who plan to cross them anyway. George calls sometimes. He jokes that we should put up a statue of Lady Justice outside the cabin. I laugh, but part of me thinks maybe a plaque, just a small one that says, "Here stands what no one could take," because it was never theirs to begin with. That cabin with its creaking porch and quiet lake view became more than just a weekend escape. It became proof that when you protect what's yours with patience, with evidence, with courage, you don't just win, you heal. And that, my friend, is the kind of ending no thief can rewrite.